In early 2022, when Russian President Vladimir Putin gave the order for his army to invade Ukraine, he could never have expected how the following years would pan out. Putin likely predicted a quick, crushing defeat, thanks to his country's enormous advantages in terms of manpower and military equipment. He envisioned Russian troops raising the country's flag over Kyiv and the Russian population proclaiming him as their greatest ever leader. Instead, his plan backfired in ways he can barely comprehend. He wanted to crush Ukraine. Instead, he turned it into a major military superpower. Back in 2022, Ukraine was not in any way a major player in the military sector. That's not to say it didn't have some interesting military projects in development and accomplishments to be proud of. It developed the now well-known R-360 Neptune missile, for example, which has since gone on to modify in various ways and deploy against numerous Russian targets. It also had a reasonably strong military force to defend its territory, should the need ever arise, and old stocks of Soviet-era tanks and other weaponry to call on. However, it was not one of the first countries that would have sprung to mind when talking about the world's best missile programs or military innovations, nor would it have been listed among the most resilient and tactically adept armed forces on the planet. But that's all changed. Now, Ukraine absolutely is in the discussions when listing world-leading militaries. It's the pioneer, the benchmark, the example for countless other nations around the world to follow, and even major established military powers in Europe and beyond are looking at Ukraine to lead and guide them in strengthening their own defenses. Ukraine's tremendous transformation is entirely due to the amazing efforts of its people and various military branches, manufacturers, and other related entities. It's a story of overcoming the odds, of adapting in the face of adversity, of not backing down but rising up, and it all began on February 24, 2022, when those first Russian troops crossed over the border and dared to threaten the territory of the Ukrainian people. Since that date, Ukraine's defense sector has seen a staggering 350% growth, as detailed in a recent in-depth report for the Jamestown Foundation by Taras Kuzio, professor of political science at the National University of Kyiv Mohyla Academy and associate research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, a London-based think tank. In his report, Professor Kuzio also noted that 2023 to 2024 was a particularly impactful year for Ukraine, with defense investment rising by a staggering 900%, with estimates putting the exact amount somewhere between $35 and $50 million. This just shows just how much money and growth the Ukrainian defense sector has experienced in recent years, with the industry effectively rising up and almost quadrupling in size in the last 3.5 years, as only 26% of Ukraine's current defense companies actually operated prior to 2022. That kind of growth is unprecedented, and it shows just how incredibly well Ukraine's engineers, developers, military experts, and innovators have responded to the invasion. They could have cowered in fear, they could have rolled over and submitted to the invaders, waving the white flag in the face of a much larger and stronger force. Instead, they stood firm. They fought back, dug in, and worked tirelessly to find new ways to defend themselves, investing in everything from drone technology to artificial intelligence, tank armor, missile systems, and so much more. And, as Professor Kuzio puts it, this growth is only going to continue for as long as the war wages on. Growth of Ukraine's defense sector will continue because Russia's maximalist goals have not changed and international attempts at brokering peace have failed. This is the tragic but true state of the war today. While various nations and world leaders, including US President Donald Trump, have pushed for peace and a ceasefire between Kyiv and Moscow, the war seems no closer to ending today than it did a year or two ago. Even though Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky has shown a real willingness to bring the conflict to a close, his Russian counterpart Putin has done the exact opposite. He's repeatedly said one thing but done another, discussing peace agreements with Trump one moment but launching a record-level drone and missile attacks on Kyiv the next. Putin's words and actions make his position clear. Earlier this year, he notably stated that Ukraine belonged to Russia. I've said many times that I consider the Russian and Ukrainian peoples to be one people. In this sense, all of Ukraine is ours. We have an old rule: wherever a Russian soldier sets foot is ours. Putin has also remained steadfast in his commitment to continue the war, no matter what. Even as his country's economy crumbles and his troops struggle to make gains along the front lines with dramatic losses of life and equipment, still he pushes on, saying, Our troops are advancing along the entire line of contact. Every day, more or less, but every day they go forward, and the advance will continue. For as long as that advance goes on, for as long as Russian forces continue to invade Ukraine, steal its land and kill its people, the Ukrainian people will be forced to defend themselves. And in order to defend themselves, their defense sector will continue to create, innovate, and astound the world with its efficiency and unique ability to develop extraordinary weaponry and defenses, often on tight budgets and in remarkably short time spans. This is vital, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe and the future prospects of peace around the world. As EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas notes,
it is clear that Russia shows no wish to end this war. For Europe, this can only mean one thing, more military, diplomatic and economic support to Ukraine. And in the event of truce, a strong Ukrainian military is the strongest security guarantee there is, and that's why we are also supporting them with training, funding and equipment.
Thankfully, Ukraine's military is in a stronger position today than it has ever been, and there are numerous stats to back this up. In regard to drone warfare, for example, Ukraine is now the biggest producer of tactical and long-range drones on the planet. When the war ends, it will be seen as the drone capital of the world, and countless other armies across the globe will be looking towards Kyiv to either purchase drones or learn more about how to make their own and how to effectively use them in the field of battle. And Ukraine's forces have unparalleled experience in this domain because drones have come to dominate this war more than any other weapon or piece of military equipment. It didn't start off that way, with Russia originally relying on more conventional means of warfare, like tanks and armoured vehicles, to overwhelm its opposition. But as the months and years went by and the tanks proved increasingly ineffective, Russia turned to drones, firing them with increasing frequency towards Ukraine's towns and cities. Charts tracking this year's Russian drone attacks showed just how big they've become. The Kremlin used to launch dozens of UAVs over the borders and into Ukraine. Now, it regularly sends hundreds of them, with one recent record-setting attack involving more than 820 drones in total. Ukraine has had to find ways to deal with that, but it's also found the time to develop its own drones and master its own form of drone warfare too, a form that, in many ways, is far more effective than Russia's. Because Russia's tactics rely primarily on brute force. That's why it keeps on breaking its own records and sending larger and larger swarms into Ukraine. It knows that the vast majority will be shot down, since the Ukrainian armed forces have such impressive and effective air defense systems in place far and wide across their land. But Russia also knows that some drones will be able to bypass those defenses and deal damage to its targets, which include everything from hospitals and schools to residential homes and power stations. Ukraine, meanwhile, uses drones much more efficiently, precisely, and carefully. It doesn't follow the wasteful model of its opponent, nor does it commit war crimes by launching drones at completely innocent civilians on a regular basis, like Russia does. Instead, it picks and chooses its targets with care and plans its attacks with precision, regularly taking out the pieces of infrastructure that matter the most to the Kremlin, launching attacks that have the best chances of bringing the war to a speedy conclusion. It has, for example, recently focused its strikes on the likes of oil refineries and fuel storage facilities, triggering a massive fuel crisis that's spreading like wildfire around Russia at this very moment. And Ukrainian drones are getting smarter and deadlier by the day. As Professor Kuzio's report notes, from 2025 and into 2026, the country is set to shift from the traditional one drone one operator model of drone warfare to AI-driven drone swarms with the power to operate autonomously without the need for much or any human control or intervention. This will change the state of the war even further, as AI-powered drones won't be subject to the same risks or challenges as conventional models. They won't be so easily taken out by jammers and electronic warfare measures, for example, so can more easily bypass enemy defenses and strike their targets, and there's no telling how Ukraine's armed forces could use this kind of technology to deal far more devastating blows to whatever's left of Russia's energy infrastructure. Ukraine has also changed the game in the missile sector. It started the war with little more than old Soviet stocks and its Neptune anti-ship missiles. It's since gone on to create several variants of the Neptune, including one that can carry out attacks on land-based targets to strike Russian radars, air defenses, airfields and infrastructure, plus the Long Neptune, a long-range variant that can travel over 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers, bringing countless new locations deep into Russia within range. Ukraine also recently unveiled its SAP-SAN missile, the first ballistic missile to be made within Ukraine, capable of traveling 4 times faster than the speed of sound, as well as the Flamingo, boasting a jaw-dropping range of more than 1,800 miles. On top of all these achievements in drones and missiles, Ukraine has brought numerous additional innovations to the table, from AI-powered air defense turrets to special armor add-on packages that make tanks and armored vehicles more resilient in the field. These kinds of advancements are made possible because of 2 major factors. The first is the immense investment and financial aid provided by Ukraine's many important allies around the world, particularly those in Europe and the NATO alliance. This funding, provided through initiatives like the ERA Loans for Ukraine program, allows Kyiv's defense contractors and companies to continue their research and development efforts. The second is the fact that the Ukrainian government is so willing to support and foster innovation. It set up the Brave One platform, for example, which provides support for around 1,500 technical companies in the form of $30 million in grants. Brave One has helped in the creation of several vital technologies that are being used in the war today, including interceptor drones that can find and take out Russian reconnaissance drones, making it harder for the Russian forces to gain intelligence and plan their attacks. More than 200 AI-driven innovations are being supported by Brave One 2, covering everything from AI analysis of photos and videos captured by UAVs to advanced military intelligence systems powering the drones of tomorrow. What's more, the platform supports around 140 electronic warfare manufacturers, many of whom are not merely making products to serve Ukraine today, but designing them in accordance with NATO standards too, so that they could be easily sold and deployed in other nations in the future. And it's extremely likely that many nations will indeed be negotiating with Kyiv in the coming years to procure some Ukrainian drone technologies of their own, because nobody, not even the United States, can rival Ukraine at the moment in this sector. As Nathan Mintz, co-founder of the Californian defense company CX2, told the Wall Street Journal, no US company is keeping up with Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal also revealed that US drones have been sent to Ukraine but often failed to deliver results. Many US companies that brought drones to Ukraine watched them fall out of the sky or failed to complete missions. Given that the US leads the way in almost all military aspects, this just goes to show what an extraordinary job Ukraine is doing, as it's even ahead of America in regard to drone warfare. Ukraine has also become less reliant on weapons systems from allies as the war has progressed. Early on, it desperately needed the likes of missiles and anti-tank weapons from supporting nations like the US and the United Kingdom. But over time, it's focused more and more on building up its domestic projects and production capacities. Now, Ukraine produces 60% of the equipment used by its armed forces, so only a minority comes from other nations. It also makes more artillery shells than the whole of the NATO alliance, as well as Europe. Its production rates have risen across the board, with anti-tank weapons up by 100%, ammunition by 150%, artillery by 200%, and armored personnel carriers by an astonishing 400%. As a specific example of this rise in action, Ukraine made just one Bodana howitzer back in 2022. Now, in 2025, it makes 20 of them every single month. What's even more impressive is that Ukraine is able to produce weapons like these faster and more cost effectively than other nations. It can deliver howitzers in 60 days for only $2.5 million per unit, compared to a cost of $4.3 million in Western nations, and delays often lasting not just months but several years. This is partly due to the fact that most of Ukraine's defense sector is made up of private companies that can operate with a strong degree of flexibility and freedom. Bureaucracy is kept to a minimum, and everything is designed with the battlefield in mind, so there aren't usually extensive phases of prototyping, testing, and refining. Products are simply made and rolled out, ready to use against the Russians. This is a stark contrast to the state-dominated military-industrial complexes that exist in other nations like Russia, which can lead to production delays and reams of unnecessary red tape. There are more than 500 private defense companies in Ukraine today, mostly working with parts produced domestically, forming an enclosed ecosystem that gets things done cheaply and smartly, with rapid innovation and zero government interference. The results of this are clear to see, and there are countless examples of exciting and ambitious Ukrainian defense startups churning out amazing equipment in next to no time. Maxon Systems, for instance, needed just 7 months to launch itself as a business and construct an anti-drone interceptor costing around $3,500. Ukraine also set up its Defense Procurement Agency (AOZ) in January 2024 as the only organization within the Ministry of Defense tasked with procuring equipment for the armed forces. This too helped to slash bureaucracy massively and expedite the flow of new weapons and systems from private companies into the hands of Ukrainian soldiers. All in all, Ukraine has set an amazing example here, and one that many other nations may wish to follow. In the harsh realities of a real-world war, it didn't have time to sit around waiting months or years to make and test new weapons before using them. It needed to cut out the middlemen and fast-track the process, and that's exactly what it did. Now, it boasts some of the most impressive military manufacturers on the planet, including world-leading drone creators such as Skyfall, maker of the infamous Vampire or Baba Yaga drone, and TAF, which produces the Calibri 7 and 8 drones. And as Ukraine's defense industry grows, the country is also forming increasingly important and valuable partnerships with major powers around the world. The US, for example, is investing heavily in Ukrainian defenses, preparing a $100 billion deal with Kyiv in exchange for ownership rights of certain Ukrainian military technologies. It's the first time that the US has ever purchased military hardware from a non-NATO state. America's Department of Defense has also worked out contracts with 2 US-Ukrainian partners for the development of long-range drones, while NASA has reached out and acquired Ukrainian robots created by the company Drone UA. The company's co-founder and managing partner, Valery Yakovenko, says that this shows how Ukraine has now become a global technology pioneer. Testing our solutions in the United States paves the way for lasting collaboration with NASA. This proves that Ukrainian innovations are shaping the future. Europe, too, is continuously looking for ways to invest in and learn from Ukraine's burgeoning defense industry. In many ways, Ukraine is now the continent's first and most vital line of defense, creating and testing the military equipment that may be needed in years to come to protect the continent from future Russian aggression. The EU has therefore set up initiatives like the aforementioned ERA loans and the Security Action for Europe (SAFE) framework to support Ukraine however it can, with European leaders, governments and private companies all reaching out and building connections with the Ukrainian defense sector. The Nordic and Baltic nations have been particularly active in engaging with Ukraine and supporting its defense companies, with Ukraine outsourcing some of its military production to locations within Denmark and Norway, for example. But even further west, countries like Germany, France and the UK have all shown real eagerness to partner with and learn from Ukraine, and there are now more than 40 Western defense companies working directly with Ukraine. That includes some of the biggest names in the business, like Lockheed Martin from the US, Rheinmetall from Germany, and Thales from France. With every passing day, Ukraine's defense industry is growing stronger and more valuable. It's building bridges with allies and investors around the world. It's setting examples that even major military nations are eager to emulate, and it's rolling out innovations faster and more effectively than anyone else in the world. It's a genuine force to be reckoned with, and it was all forged in the fire of this war with Russia. Putin wanted to weaken Ukraine and see the country crumble under the Kremlin's boot. Instead, he woke a sleeping giant, turning a nation that may have once seemed quite small and fragile into one of the strongest military superpowers of our time. Now, learn more about some of Ukraine's recent defense innovations in our videos looking at the ultra-long-range Flamingo missile, which not only brings Moscow into range, but could also strike targets even deeper into Russia, and the mysterious new puffy Neptune, which is believed to have even greater range than the original, opening up new targets and lines of attack for Kyiv's frontline forces. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can be among the first to find out about Ukraine's new innovations and tactical successes, as well as other important news and developments from this conflict and others around the world.